Hello, everybody. Brad here. I'm actually out in Vietnam right now, just loving it on trip number 4 here to the country, and having a blast. As many of you may know, I've been digging in hard and learning Vietnamese and studying languages in general out here. Made a lot of friends, and yeah, just overall enjoying it. Now, recently, I got asked a question by one of the Vietnamese students out here. It really got me thinking. They really wanted to know which language is easier or harder, Vietnamese or English. Because, the truth is, or the weird part, I think, is I have met a lot of people here in Vietnam that do speak English really, really well. And at the same time, I met almost zero foreigners, English speakers that speak Vietnamese, whether that's in the United States or here. Very, very few, almost zero, I would actually say. And that's kind of strange to me. Like, it really comes down to that fundamental thing. I guess a lot of the foreigners I run across say that Vietnamese is really difficult. It's a tonal language, you gotta watch out. But at the same time, I've also heard from a lot of people, like, English is the hardest language to learn in the world. So, who's right? Well, I tell you what, after years of experience learning different languages, I'm not an expert, I don't have a PhD in linguistics or anything like that, but I can actually give a very broad, maybe accurate opinion as far as that goes, and maybe shed some light for you a little bit. First things first, English is not the hardest language to learn in the world. A lot of people say that. That myth gets thrown around. I think the biggest reason why that myth gets thrown around is because on some level, doesn't it feel good to say it? Like, as an English speaker, to say, English is the hardest language in the world. But I can speak it. Makes me one of the smartest people in the world. Yeah, buddy. Feels good to say, but it's not right. It's just not true. In fact, in linguistical studies, it's right in the middle of the pack. Level 3, level 4 language. There's plenty of languages that are a lot more difficult than English. I will promise you. Take a look at Icelandic, for example, or what about Osha? Or a lot of the Native American languages. Oh, Lord have mercy, I have a whole list that are a lot more difficult on every level versus English. But yeah, to take a closer look, let's break it down a little bit. First of all, the phonetics. The first thing that a lot of people say about Vietnamese is that, it's a tonal language. It's like Chinese, it's tonal, it's up, down, you gotta remember all those tones, and they're just impossible. I just can't do it. And so yeah, you're gonna spend the rest of your life learning tones. And I don't know, I'm tone deaf, so I just, not even gonna try. Okay, well, let you emphasize penis. Let me emphasize a penis. Let me emphasize happiness. Same letters, folks. Same vowels, same consonants, same everything. But why does penis and happiness sound so different? It's the tone. English is a tonal language. It really is. It really is. For that matter, emphasis versus emphasis. Do they sound the same? Not at all. If they sound the same to you, then I suppose you'd be tone deaf. But I have never, ever met anyone in America or any English speaker that's truly tone deaf in that sense. For that matter, let's think about like, and Again, that's the same sound. There's only one letter, M. But why do they sound different? Again, no one would argue that they sound the same. That'd be ridiculous. So, really, in English, we have a very, very complex tone structure and stress on each individual syllable, how sentences fit together to make it sound native. We can change questions or change statements into questions simply using tones. You're going to go over there. You're going to go over there. You're going to go over there? Are you going to go over there? Same words, generally speaking, but totally different meanings, right? So, yeah, certainly in Vietnamese, they do have, tones, of course. It's a monosyllabic language. So, yeah, there's one syllable for each one and whatnot. And, yeah, there are more tones than there is in Chinese. Chinese has 4 plus the untone, or no tone mark, so I guess 5 if you want. Whereas Vietnamese has, of course those 4, but they have even more, including like a glottal stop, like mo instead of mote. Or they'll have like the tilde, the nga, which would be, yeah, that would be one example of a word, but mi, it's not me, it's mi. So yeah, but that glottal stop, truth be told, we actually have that in English as well. I mean, think about words like ghosts, or desks. We kind of put a stop in the word a little bit. We do have glottal stops in English. We just don't use them as frequently as, let's say Vietnam or Vietnamese language would. Similarly, if we want to say Tom versus Tom, just think about it as a question. Like, did you say Tom? Yeah, of course. When we ask a question, we raise our tone. All of the tones in Vietnamese, I would argue, we actually have in English. You just don't know it. So, I guess in that sense, it's not nearly as hard as a lot of people think. Another way of looking at it is that actually in written Vietnamese, they clearly and explicitly put the tone on the syllable. So it's perfectly clear. Every single syllable that has the same tone to it will be pronounced the same way. Like mi, nga, dang, shan. All of them have the little tilde above it. Now, in English, in contrast, there's no markers of any kind. And to use that example, emphasis versus emphasis. By looking at the word written, there's no way that you would know how it's actually pronounced. Unless you look it up in a dictionary or something like that, or you hear somebody say it. So, it's camera, or camera. And not only that, but the rules in English are remarkably inconsistent. There basically is no rules. English is a mix of many separate languages, including like Old Anglo-Saxon, a little bit of French, a little bit of German, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of Latin, a little bit of Greek. So when you put them all together with a variety of systems and fast forward 1,000 years, there's no rules. There's no way you would ever know by reading a word how it's actually pronounced. Vietnamese, first try, every time, you can nail it. So, yeah, in that sense, when it comes to a toss-up, which is easier, English or Vietnamese, I would say Vietnamese is actually easier because it's explicit. Whereas English, you have to totally guess or hear the word at one point or another. In terms of practicing and saying the tones, well, yeah, you've got to practice. Just like in English, you've got to practice. I mean, let's face it. I mean, obviously, if you don't listen to tones, you don't learn anything about linguistics, you don't pay attention to how folks are speaking, you have no teacher, and you basically put forth zero effort into it, well, yeah, of course it's going to be hard. Let's face it. But same thing in English. If you don't try, you'll just walk around saying happiness all day long when you wanted to say happiness. For some, it's the same, I guess. But anyway, beyond that, taking a look at vocabulary, well, yeah, of course there's a lot of new words to learn. Let's face it, in English, we pretty much have a word for everything. And believe it or not, in Vietnamese, they actually have a word for everything. Sure, there are some subjects I think that English are a little better suited for, and Vietnamese might be a little better suited. For example, just talking about rice, let's just say, Vietnamese, you've got to know, man, a good 50 to 100 words to really be able to talk about rice and all the different types, styles, stages, cooked, not cooked, this type, that type, cooked, It's really broad. But that doesn't necessarily make it harder. I would say the total number of unique English words and the total number of unique Vietnamese words, if you were to look at an unabridged dictionary, they'd actually be about the same. Now, with that said, it is true that going from English to Vietnamese or Vietnamese to English, they're really far apart in terms of vocabulary, really far apart. In Spanish or Swedish or other languages that are somewhat related to English, yeah, you can take a stab at like 10-20% of the words, you know, like inteligente, intelligent. Ah, got it. Refrigerador, refrigerator. Yeah, you got it. You know, it's not too bad, really. But you know, you take a word like shangda. There's no way you would guess that means creative. So yeah, you basically, unlike Spanish or those languages related to English, yeah, you've got a lot to learn. You have to start from zero, basically. There's not aside from technology words, there's hardly a single word that's really the same. But yeah, I mean, same goes for Vietnamese speakers. They pretty well have got to learn it all from scratch. So yeah, I guess in terms of vocabulary, they're definitely, you know, about the same. In terms of grammar, I tell you, one of my favorite things about grammar is that in Vietnamese, it's simple. It's actually, compared to a lot of languages, it's really, really simple. A lot of the other monosyllabic languages, Chinese included, they don't inflect or change their verbs depending on tense or plural or perspective or anything like that, or case. For example, in Spanish, just to say a simple word like to do, hacer, you've got to say yo hago, tú haces, nosotros hacemos, we make, you make, I make. And was it in the past? Hice, hizo. Is it a preterite or perfective tense or imperfect tense? Is it a future tense, future conditional, or future subjunctive? Like, whoo! You've got a whole mess of words to know just to be able to say the simple word to make or to do, which is the same word. Yeah, you've got to know 6 different ways, again, depending on perspective and plurality. And then you've got to learn it in all the different tenses. So you've got anywhere from 6 to maybe 60 different words to learn just to be able to say to make. In contrast, Vietnamese, làm. In the past, I làm. In the future, I will làm. I have already làm. Oh, it's simple, really simple. Vietnamese actually does not change any of their verbs or nouns at all. Once you know the word làm, you only have to know one word, and that works in all tenses. So that actually makes things really easy, especially compared to Spanish or other languages that have a heavy amount of inflecting like that. So yeah, without plural, without tense, without gender, you don't have to remember, is that noun masculine or feminine? You know, in Spanish, it's garbage is feminine, but a dress is male or masculine. It has nothing to do with anything. You've just got to memorize it. You know, Vietnamese? Nope. Nice and easy. So, they don't, in terms of, I guess, consistency, I really feel like English is tremendously inconsistent. There's a lot of different ways that we can say the same thing, but there's a lot of exceptions to the rule, I think is a better way to put it. A lot of phrases or phrasings that are really unique. To be sure, in Vietnamese, there's a lot of exceptions to a lot of rules. There are also a lot of odd expressions and so forth as far as that goes. But overall, I think looking at it from the perspective of a beginner to intermediate, Vietnamese is a piece of cake. I can teach you one word, sẽ, and that makes the whole sentence in the future. In fact, if you say sẽ one time in the beginning of your story, and people know it's in the future, you never have to talk or emphasize that it's in the future ever again after that. You can just speak in the basic present tense. It almost sounds like caveman talk, like tomorrow I go home. The next day I go home. 5 days ago I go home. And instead of went, shall, will, should. Really, really simple. Really simple. So with only knowing maybe 5 or 6 time period words, you can actually speak in pretty much every tense in Vietnamese, just like that. Every verb, there's no irregular verbs, AR verbs, IR verb, nope, none of that. It's really straightforward. So in terms of grammar, I would say definitely Vietnamese wins. Definitely Vietnamese wins. For Vietnamese speakers to learn English, it is tough. It is tough. Even something as simple as the concept of adverbs, like, oh, that looks good, or I'm doing well. One is describing how I'm doing, so you have to choose an adverb as opposed to an adjective. Ooh. In Vietnamese, they don't make that distinction. In fact, in a lot of cases, something that's a noun will also be a verb and an adjective, and you don't even have to change the style. Run, runner, running. Oh, it runs. That runs. It's all, you just use that same word over and over again. So it's heavily, heavily, heavily simplified. And again, I think a lot easier to learn. So beyond that, the writing system. I mean, yeah, that is my favorite part of Vietnamese. I have a lot of favorite parts, actually, but that's one of them. Because whoever designed or came up with the Vietnamese writing system had their head in the game that day, my friend. Absolutely had their head in the game. The best part is, similar to Spanish, the pronunciation is very, very, very consistent. Sure, there's dialectical differences, sure, but generally speaking, it's very consistent. In Spanish, if you can write it, each vowel is pronounced one way, and each consonant, generally speaking, is pronounced one way. Sometimes hard or soft, but yeah, it's really easy. You can hear a word and write it in Spanish, no problem. You're going to be right over 90% of the time. Same thing when you're reading Spanish and then see a new word, you can say it pretty much perfectly way over 90% of the time. English, on the other hand, there again, you take something like W-A-T-C-H, watch, or watch, and Y-A-T-C-H, yacht. There's no, it's a shot in the dark every time. You know, we're way up in the air. For a long time, paradigm, P-A-R-D-I-G-M, I thought it was paradigm. You know, that's what it looks like. And I'm an English speaker, so yeah, in contrast, the Vietnamese system is perfectly clear and perfectly consistent. In fact, when they have a long vowel or short vowel, they'll actually put a mark over it. You know, short vowel, long vowel, or there's a lot of hooked sounds in Vietnamese. So just to pick a quick example, tom versus tum. It's got a hook or a whisker on it, which means that you kind of put your chin out when you say it. So, but yeah, that's extremely clear when you're looking at the word when it's written, and likewise, when you hear a word, you pretty much know exactly how to write it. So yeah, it's overall really, really slick. In fact, I would argue it's up there with Spanish in terms of being level 1, super easy to learn the writing system. Obviously, once again, you got to practice on the vowels. There's more vowels than they have in, let's say, Spanish. English, we obviously have tons of vowels and tons of vowel combinations. I don't know the exact number, but in Vietnamese, there's only a few. There's only a few to know and a few to practice, and basically within a day or two, you'll be pretty decent at it. So yeah, definitely, no question about it. Learning the Vietnamese writing system is really, comparatively, is really easy versus a Vietnamese person learning how to pronounce English. So yeah, beyond that, I think in terms of making the sounds and the phonetics, it is true that there are some more and different sounds in Vietnamese that we don't necessarily have in English. Yep, that hooked O and hooked U, like hung versus huang, or yeah, there's a whole handful of examples. Koi versus kui. We don't really have a way of writing that in English, I don't think. Put your chin out. But yeah, with that said, in terms of consonants and this and that, sure, the R is a little bit different. It's not rang, it's rang, so it's slightly different. But other than that, I would say about 80% or 90% of the sounds we all have in English, and you could pretty much look at the letter, like the letter M, the letter L, oh, pretty straightforward. So in other words, trying to learn how to read and write Vietnamese, you're not exactly starting from scratch here. You've got a lot of, you're going to know, again, 80-90% right off the bat. You've just got to add a few more sounds to it, a few more vowels, a couple consonants, and you're good to go. So English in contrast, whew, huge dialectical differences. We actually, there's all kinds of situations where we'll just randomly change the pronunciation of a word or have a somewhat random spelling. And I think like G or TH switching to a J sound or something like that. We do that really often, so I guess there's a lot of exceptions to the rule. And in English, we do have a handful of new sounds that Vietnamese people may not be able to say very well. Perhaps similar to a Japanese person trying to pronounce the difference between really and lily. It's really difficult because they only have one letter that means both. Does that mean that English is hard? No, I don't think so. It's just, it all comes down to what you're used to, really. I think in particular, English, we can end our, each syllable, we can start and end with consonants, vowels, doesn't matter. We can pretty much start with any combination and end with any combination. That's a little bit weird for Vietnamese speakers. Like, mish, would be a little bit of a difficult word to say, or excess would be a hard word to say. In Spanish, to start like my name, Brad, B-R-A-D, Brad, that doesn't exist in Spanish. So yeah, it's really hard. They have to say like, Eber. It's tricky. So frankly, I think in terms of which is harder or easier, I think they're about the same, really. But I do think that a Vietnamese person would have a hard time being an expert English speaker. They'll spend the rest of their life memorizing the unique and weird pronunciation of each word. They'll have a hard time. An English speaker, once you get the basic ground rules down, you'll have no trouble with Vietnamese, consistent across the board. So yeah, I think in terms of sounds in general and in terms of the writing system, yeah, Vietnamese wins. Definitely in this category. So, I think on a bit of a final note here, the conclusion between the two, overall I would say that Vietnamese is easier to learn. But we get down to the one last factor, and here's the kicker, I think. Resources. Which one is the most heavily documented or the easiest to find resources about? Let's take an example. The Fox language, which is a Native American language down in the southern part of the United States. There's only like a dozen people that speak it, tops. It's not really consistently written. There's barely a dictionary about it. There's no teachers, there's no YouTube videos, there's no this, that, there's no newspapers, no TV shows, nothing. So, of course it's hard. Is it because the language itself is difficult? Or because the learning process itself is difficult to find resources on? When I was learning Hmong, granting the fact that there are a lot of Hmong people around, surprisingly, in the Midwest where I grew up, beyond that, it's really, really tough. There's only a couple of dictionaries and they're pretty shady. There's one textbook that was translated from French 70 years ago. Mistakes everywhere. I mean, that was hard. Now, in contrast, like take a language like Mandarin Chinese. Oh man, there's hundreds of people teaching Mandarin Chinese on YouTube. You can just go right on YouTube and learn everything that you want to learn. When it comes to Vietnamese, likewise, it's a rather well-documented language. There's lots of really thick dictionaries. There's translation apps you can put onto your phone. There's flashcard apps, online teachers, I mean, all kinds of things like that. Although, obviously, English, I think, is even better documented. There's even more people that want to learn English. I mean, let's face it, 80% of the internet is in English. So in terms of wanting to learn English, there's an entire libraries for Vietnamese speakers to want to do that. There's a lot of English teachers, people coming from America here to Vietnam that want to be able to teach it. It's everywhere. It's accessible everywhere. I mean, YouTube, you could be on YouTube the rest of your life watching English learning videos back to back forever, and you won't run out of them. So yeah, I think in terms of resources, there's probably more resources for a Vietnamese person to learn English than there is an English person to learn Vietnamese. So that's a very, very important fact, I think. More than that, in terms of usefulness, once again, 80% of the internet is in English. If you play video games or online games, for example, if you learn English, you're good to go. That opens up, the vast majority of the world out there. If you want to travel throughout Southeast Asia, for that matter, let alone Europe, India, even some parts of China, Vietnamese, almost no value aside from Vietnam, perhaps a little bit in Laos here and there, a little bit in Thailand, but in general, you're a fish out of water. With English, on the other hand, you could know English only and travel the whole world and have very few problems comparatively. So English is very, very useful. So the motivation to want to learn it is all there. And there's a lot of people here in Vietnam that when it comes to choosing which language to learn, English, no question about it. You might as well. There are almost 0 people in Vietnam that are learning Norwegian. I'm sure they exist, but whew. And arguably, perhaps tragically, a lot of people view Vietnamese as not really needing it so much in the business world. For example, again, traveling to India or any other country aside from Vietnam itself. And they might have a point as far as that's concerned. So yeah, there's not a lot of reasons why a person would want to learn Vietnamese unless they're planning on traveling here. So yeah, in that sense, it's a lot more useful, or it's easier to get motivated for an English person to learn a Vietnamese person to learn English than it is for an English person to want to pick up Vietnamese in the first place. And beyond that, there's a lot of examples of English floating around. Like just going down the street here, you're going to see English words up in the streets. Straight up, coffee. The word hotel, H-O-T-E-L. Shop, S-H-O-P. There's a bridal shop down the road that literally says bridal shop. It's smartphone, or Điện thoại thông minh. A lot of people, even the old people out in the middle of the countryside, are going to know the word smartphone. Smart, thông minh. I know that English word. It's really easy to pick up on English words in general in a lot of places in the world, including here in Vietnam, because it's just ubiquitous. You see it everywhere. Now, if you were to ask a Vietnamese person to, again, learn Swedish or learn German, well, they got to start from scratch, and there's no resources around, or it's not as in your face necessarily. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people know the basic English out here just because it's so integrated, into the country here and whatnot. So yeah, I guess looking at it from that perspective, to kind of finally answer the question, I would say, which one, in terms of the language only, I think Vietnamese is easier to learn than the amount of effort required to speak decent Vietnamese is less than the amount of effort required to speak decent English. The amount of effort to read is a lot less to read Vietnamese than reading English. And in grammar and a lot of different ways, I think Vietnamese is a lot easier than English is. But in terms of the process of actually learning, I think English is easier. It's easier to learn because it's everywhere, because you want to learn it, because they teach it in school, it's available. You could hang out with your friends and want to speak a foreign language, it's probably going to be English. If you're a Vietnamese person that wants to practice English with a foreigner, you'll have no trouble. You'll find them right down the street. And so yeah, I guess it's up to you to decide, but hopefully this bit of an overview here is sheds a little bit more light, onto it all. But no matter what, if you are an English speaker, I highly encourage you to jump into Vietnamese. It's way more fun than you think, and a lot less challenging than you think. And you can be spitting some basic phrases and counting to 10,000 and buying and selling and greeting in just a couple of hours if you really wanted to. So take the plunge, jump in, and don't be afraid. It's a blast every step of the way. But anyway, take care of y'all. Cheers.